In the spring of 1862, the Union Army launched its first major offensive against the South when it invaded the Virginia Peninsula. Despite initial success, the Union Army of the Potomac lost its momentum by summer and was dealt a serious blow by the Confederate Army during a series of battles in July of 1862. With the Union overcome by both casualties from battle and sickness caused by malaria that was common on the Virginia Peninsula, Union General George McClellan ordered a fallback position to Harrison's Landing before contemplating his next move. Even Thaddeus Lowe, who served tirelessly with his balloons during the 7 days' battle, was infected by malaria and was forced to leave the battlefield in order to recuperate. During his absence, the operation of the Union Army Balloon Corps also came to a halt. But back in Washington, D.C., Abraham Lincoln grew weary of McClellan's inability to move his army forward. McClellan protested that he didn't have enough men to take the Confederate capital at Richmond and based his assertions on the erroneous scouting reports from Allen Pinkerton's spies who exaggerated the true strength of the Confederate Army. However, as far as Lincoln was concerned, inaction was the Union Army's worst foe. In his mind, decisive action would be required to put an end to the war. The summer of 1862 saw many changes with the Union Army. Lincoln, who was disillusioned with McClellan following the general's performance during the Peninsula Campaign, replaced the commander of the Army of the Potomac with General Henry Halleck. When Halleck failed to live up to Lincoln's expectations following a second Union defeat at Manassas, Lincoln temporarily reinstated McClellan as commander. But again, McClellan failed to seize the initiative as commander of the Union Army and presided over a battle that would suffer the most casualties in the course of one day during the entire history of the war: Antietam. Following the Battle of Antietam, Lincoln met with General McClellan and relieved him of his command for a second and final time. When Thaddeus Lowe returned to active service with the Union Army of the Potomac after Antietam, he discovered that McClellan's successors held the Balloon Corps in lesser regard. Although Lowe was able to provide invaluable observations of Confederate troop movements at the battles of Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville, the days were numbered for the Union Army Balloon Corps. Meanwhile, as Thaddeus Lowe and the Balloon Corps faced challenges from within the Union Army, the Confederate Army attempted to match the Yankees in air power. The first attempt at a Confederate Air Force came in 1862 when General Joseph E. Johnston acquired a crude hot air balloon. The Confederate Army's first experiment with aeronautics came to an abrupt end when the hot air balloon broke away from its tethers with its pilot aboard. Although the pilot escaped any serious injury, the balloon was unusable after its flight. The Confederacy's second balloon would go on to have a somewhat more illustrious history. Known simply as the silk dress balloon, legend had it that a group of loyal Confederate belles donated their fancy silk dress gowns for the construction of the balloon since silk material was in scarce supply due to the war. Designed by a balloonist from Georgia named Charles Savor, the silk dress balloon was filled with gas from the city mains of Richmond, Virginia, where it was used for observations over the city during the Peninsula Campaign in the spring and summer of 1862. Piloted by Colonel Edward Porter Alexander, the silk dress balloon was instrumental in observing Union Army movements. But its career came to a premature ending while the balloon was being used for observations on the James River near Richmond. When the Confederate cruiser Teaser ran aground on a shoal, the ship and the silk dress balloon were captured by the Union gunboat Maratanza. With the capture of the silk dress balloon, the Confederacy's attempt to match the Union Army in the air may have ended, but its legend would endure forever. As Confederate General William Taliaferro wrote after the war, "The silk dress balloon contained the last dress in the Confederacy. This capture was the meanest trick of the war and one I have never forgiven." Following its capture, the silk dress balloon was deemed unusable by the Union Army Balloon Corps. It was later cut up in pieces and given to members of the Union government.